Dr. Donna Kinchlow. One common thread, session number 1. You are about to jump into a self-reflective course designed to open your heart and mind to a new peaceful perspective about an often neglected topic. Think about this question. Does a common thread exist in every life? Is there anything that you could think of that would cross that horrible chasm of diversity and division of people, especially in our world today? There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of contention. Can you guess the common thread that ties us all together? I believe loss is the common thread. Over 200 years ago, Benjamin Franklin penned, "The only certainty and guarantee in life is death and taxes." I agree with that because that falls under the umbrella of loss. If we delve into a self-reflective course to improve our understanding of loss, a change of perspective is more than possible. It's amazing how we get more education when we learn to drive a car than we do learn about coping and dealing with loss when loss is a promise. Let's examine the truth about loss. Loss is universal. No one's exempt, and it's everywhere. It jumps into the lives of people from every country. It doesn't matter what your social status is. It doesn't matter what your faith tradition is. You're not going to get away from loss in your life. It's personal. My loss is mine. Your loss is yours. It cannot be a comparison study. You may think your loss is greater than mine, or maybe you need to feel like you need to advise me on how I'm not dealing with it. It all comes down to it's a very individualistic situation when loss is in your life. And what does it trigger? It triggers feelings that you may not even have known you could actually have or experience, or maybe they never showed up before. I had a friend who explained it this way. You suffer loss and you never know what emotion's going to surface, where or when. She had lost her son in a terrible accident, and she was an educator, and so here she is at the grocery store, and one of her students comes up and says, "Oh, I am so sorry. I wasn't able to be at the funeral." Now, she knew that the young girl was being kind and apologetic, but at that moment, that mother wanted to grab her grocery cart and throw it out the window of the grocery store because that was just anger, anger, anger. And you never know what emotion's going to show up. Loss will trigger feelings. You don't have control of your emotions. Usually we try really hard to have control of our emotions, but this is one time in your life your emotions have control of you. And what about the size of a loss? Well, I guess it's just like every person that you know. We all come in different sizes and shapes, and so does loss. Yeah, a little tiny petite loss. Maybe I'm at a fair and I drop the ice cream out of my cone. That's a tiny loss. I could probably even just go get another ice cream cone. Or maybe I have a huge loss. Maybe you've lost your job, or you've lost all your money in the stock market. Huge losses. we'll talk about the differences of those as time goes on. Loss can be paralyzing. What do I mean by that? Well, when you're paralyzed, I worked at Duke University Medical Center many years ago, and I worked on the trauma unit. We took care of an awful lot of people that were quadriplegic or paraplegic, meaning they weren't able to move because of a spinal cord injury. You get immobile. You aren't able to do what you normally could do when you're paralyzed. It's a big change. And loss can do that. Some people don't even want to get out of bed. They don't want to move at all, even though they can. And loss can be ignored. There's a wonderful book that I've put on for your reference, and it is by Earl Hip, and he talks about stuffing your loss in a loss pot, or carrying it on your back, or just sticking it somewhere where you're not dealing with it, and it's just going to be in this pot, and one of these days it's going to boil over. So you can't ignore it. Now, if you ignore it and you neglect it and you don't face it, the saddest part of it is going to bother your mental health. It's going to cause issue for you. What do you think about loss being good or bad? You know, there are a couple words we always call absolutes. It's always and never. I don't believe that we can use absolutes when you talk about loss. It isn't always bad, it isn't always good, and it isn't never good or never bad. So absolutes and loss, it's a sometimes thing. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, and can it cause growth? Have you thought that thought? Hopefully in your life you haven't experienced a lot of loss. But if you're in the healthcare professions and you're getting into nursing or anything where you're dealing with people, I am telling you, you need to be prepared to have an understanding about this often neglected topic. I want you to know that in my life, I know loss can cause growth. And you're going to know it too. What can it give you? Well, it can give you grit and resiliency. And one of the greatest things it can do is give you empathy. You know, there's a difference between empathy and sympathy. Sympathy, I feel sorry for you. I am so sorry you're going through that. I have no idea what it's like, but I'm so sorry. Empathy, I walked that road, and I know that road is familiar with me. And your road may be a different path, but I just want you to know I can empathize because my dog died and your dog died. And I have a little bit of familiarity. I think we all need a sensitivity antenna. And that's something that I may have coined the phrase. What do you mean by a sensitivity antenna, Donna? What I mean, you have to think about what an antenna does. What does an antenna do? Well, the purpose of an antenna is to send and receive radio waves. And years ago, when I was a kid, you had a television, you had to have an antenna on the roof, on the top of the house, and you only could probably get maybe three channels if you were lucky. You know, it's grabbing up waves for the TV. Don't ask me how. Cell phone towers, y'all are probably more familiar with cell phone towers and being able to have your phone and say, oh, I have so many bars. Oh, what are you doing? You're receiving so that you can send messages. And that's what a sensitivity antenna is. The purpose of an antenna is to send and receive radio waves in order to communicate and disseminate information really quickly. So where do I get the sensitivity piece? If I have compassion and caring and sensitivity when it comes to loss in my life or in your life or in the lives of patients or families or strangers? What makes me have a sensitivity antenna? Because you see, when I know what the characteristics of loss are, I know what feelings loss can trigger, then I can become sensitive to my own needs as well as to yours. How are we going to do it? Reading verbal and nonverbal messages. Isn't that the old-fashioned communication theory that you send and receive, you listen, you talk, you verbalize, you observe behavior, and when loss shows up, if we have a sensitivity antenna, it's going to help us be better prepared when loss comes our way or when we see the signs and symptoms of loss in someone else's life. Please remember this, the more we are aware, the better we can prepare. Even if you haven't experienced loss or many losses in your life, the more you know about it, the more you can help other people and the more you can help yourself by being sensitive to what it is. So let's take a look at the characteristics and the feelings that loss can trigger. You know the word acute means sudden. You know the word chronic means it's going to be long lasting. Acute is sudden. It is a sudden, unexpected life event. That's the definition of loss. Now, the characteristics that really get you. Loss begins with an end. And that's something to think about. It begins with an end. It ends something that has been. It creates separation. Let's say your parents divorced. That's going to separate your relationships with your mom or your dad or both, or maybe your brothers and sisters. Loss can change your life forever. It may be a final loss. It may come with that characteristic of finality. Loss can impact your future. If I had money saved for college and then got into an accident and had to use that money to buy a new car, that loss impacted my future. In your computers, when you're writing PowerPoints, when you're doing your papers, you have a refresh button. You have an arrow button that'll let you go back to the last slide and correct something that you've misspelled. But with loss, oftentimes, there's no going back. There's no refresh button. It can be overwhelming. And loss is packed with questions. If you're a nurse in the hospital, oftentimes when patients are experiencing loss, you're going to get slammed with, why me? How could this be? How did this happen? Often loss provides questions that you may not be able to answer. They don't have a cookie cutter answer. And what about the feelings? Loss triggers feelings. And the feelings of loss are complicated. They're a mixture instead of just a singular. They're plural. How do you like that? You never thought about your feelings being plural. But you can cry and you can laugh. You can have anger. It can be all mixed up. You can get foggy in the head and be confused. I had a friend who lost her husband. She owned a business. She knew the city. She was a great driver. And she had to pull over. She had to pull over and stop the car. She forgot where she was and she forgot where she was going. And when I asked her how she was doing, she expressed it like this. It's really dark. It's really dark. So people can be angry, feel helpless, be sad, and it can be a conundrum and a blend and a mix, not just an individual situation. And isn't it amazing that if you know this and you start seeing these behaviors and these feelings coming out of a friend of yours, and they hadn't shared with you that something was going on or that they had lost something, you might be able to pinpoint it and go, whoa, wow, what's happened? What's happened? So as we begin our journey, the greatest thing, remember this: loss is an unexpected life event. It begins with an ending. It is universal, it is real, it is personal. Don't forget all of those things. It's complicated and it's going to happen. If you haven't experienced a lot of loss, you can count your blessings. But in life, it is a guarantee. It is a certainty. And the more we are aware, the better we can prepare. And if we know and own the characteristics of loss, that is going to help sharpen our sensitivity antennas. And I hope you want one of those. The journey to a more peaceful perspective of loss has only just begun. See you in session 2. Reference: Earl Hip's Help for the Hard Time Getting Through Loss. Excellent book, wonderful book. It's really good for children and for teenagers and for people who are college age. So enjoy that. And I thank you very much. If you want to contact me, here's my contact information. And I will see you at session 2.